Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us on today, May 9th, for another episode of Campbell Talk. And today we have with us Kishi Chad, and we'll get to talk to him soon. And so, as you know, we're doing this whole series, right, called Ending the HIV Epidemic. And so while we have guests on the show having these conversations, this is not just our conversation. This is all of our conversation. So like, share, follow, subscribe, and also invite some folks to join the conversation. If you have questions, feel free to ask them in the message board. We will do our best to get your questions answered on air. And we look forward to hearing from you. Continue to enjoy the show, and we'll be right back. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you?
I'm happy to be here. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm doing really good. It's glad to see you.
Likewise. It's Monday, May 9th. This year is going by so quickly, but honestly, all we can do is make the most of it. Nothing more than that.
Absolutely. And just to think, just a couple days ago was January 1st, right? So tell us about yourself.
Hmm. All right. So, obviously, my name is Kishai. I'm 33 years old. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I grew up here in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale to be exact. For the past 9 years, I've worked in public health, sexual health, community work, and prior to that, I was volunteering as well in the field. And I am at this point looking to branch out of just like one location. Obviously, Fort Lauderdale is a place that has a lot of resources, and I've also expanded recently to Miami in the last couple of years. But now I'm trying to build connections and create opportunities and room for not just queer people and not just public health, but just in general, building more of a community around all of South Florida. And I've done that with the South Florida Men's Wellness Conference. That's where the different Florida Department of Healths in Palm Beach, Broward, Miami, Monroe, Manatee County all kind of came together, and we had conversations that were needed to have, especially for LGBTQ populations and people of color, men of color, and seeing how we can create new solutions. I think there's a lot of old fashioned things that are still occurring in the field. And also, what's great about being in the field at this point is we're seeing a lot of we're seeing in real time a lot of progression being made. And I think it's important to utilize the things that we've learned from the past, but also moving forward and being innovative, and also like not being afraid to speak our minds like you.
I try. I
Yeah.
try. Okay. So you've been doing this work for a long time. I mean, kind of like if you can make a bucket list or a wish list, what would you like to see happen in HIV in like the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a really good question. One thing I can already tell you is that I understand how important HIV is, not only in our field, but in the world. But one thing on our end, as providers and as community people, I would love to see how we can improve the way we treat people living with HIV. Like,
Mm.
that would be nice to see. It would be nice to see in the field. I don't think people realize that we are we're doing ourselves a a disservice, right? when we deal with people who are living with HIV. And I think we wanna not just use uh, destigmatizing language. I think that's a great thing we've already been doing. But I feel like the way in which we have care provided for them, I would love to see that completely be like reevaluated, reimagined,
Mhm.
and improved overall. Would love to see also uh, globally. I would like to see more people living with HIV and less people dying, because I think in our field, especially, we often pay attention to what's happening in our home. But when we look at places where they don't have these programs and the access, like, it's much worse. It's much worse. And I would love to see on a global scale, I would love to see not only people become undetectable, but also live, thrive, and of course a cure. Of course a cure. Of course, a cure. A cure would be wonderful. But until then, I think even once we have a cure, we still would need to deal with all of the trauma, all of the issues that have occurred. And like, people are still talking about Magic Johnson and Easy E. It's like, honey, we've like we have we have achieved so much, and HIV and AIDS is so much more than just what happened in the 90s. You
Yeah.
know, like, it's I would just love to see some evolution and more things that have happened, like, in the now. Like, the general public is, I mean, they're throwing around PrEP a little bit, but I'm like, there's more than that happening in our field.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see, and this is where, you know, our organization, Campbell Health Solution, comes in, is just doing a lot more intergenerational work with families and individuals, because we have to understand that the cultural aspect of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, um, I've grown up in my family situations where there are always, you know, a grandma or an aunt. There's always like at least two or three generations of folks living in the same area. So sometimes the dynamics are different. So if we can get into those intergenerational family settings and start to have those conversations, we'll definitely make a dent in this. So, um, what would you say is missing, because ending the HIV epidemic is huge right now, and everybody is like, "Oh, we need to end it. We need to end it 2030." And and the list goes on and on. So, what do you feel is missing, or a missing component that we haven't yet touched?
Okay, so internally, I would say accountability. I don't think the people in positions of power are willing to acknowledge what they could work on or what they could improve. Just in my opinion, I think that there's a lot of comfort and there's a lot of stagnation. And there's certain formulas that have existed, and it's kind of like, well, we've done this for so long, let's just keep it here. And I think with anything that you want to go for in life, you have to be willing to assess what is the good and what is the not so good, and how can we maintain what has worked, but whatever isn't working, um especially talking to the clients, talking to the people who we're serving, like asking them, like, real talk, like, how do you feel? Like, are we really supporting you 360? Like, do you feel seen, heard, supported, and valued? And then I want to say, outside of that, I think the general public still doesn't see HIV as a chronic condition, and I don't know if it's because of the years of stigma, or it's because, as a field, we tend to not um, align HIV with other things. Like, as a person who's queer and is out and in the community, anytime something's related to health, it's really just HIV, and it's not really on a more broad scale, I don't really see HIV being grouped with and discussed with diabetes or high blood pressure. And those are some of the things I do in my outreach, in my presentation. I'm always mentioning the two together, or multiple conditions together, just to normalize, just so people can so people can get it in their head that, like, yes, this is aligned with that, because diabetes is preventable, HIV is preventable, HIV is manageable, diabetes is manageable. There is a similarity there, and I think if we continue to, like, kind of on its own focus on HIV so much, especially in whatever space it's in, we it goes over a lot of people's heads, and you're gonna get a lot of people turned off. And that is unfortunate, that people are so turned off by HIV that they won't talk about it. It's a part of life. It's here. I mean, it's what, 38 million people around the world are living with HIV. Like, we
Mhm.
can't afford to ignore it. However, we still need to, I think, all agencies and all medical facilities, I think they should all normalize HIV as like a routine test and a routine conversation. I think that's the key. And the more we continue to, like, just push HIV testing on its own, like, I personally feel like there's just so many missed
The
opportunities.
disservice.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we get more people involved? Like, what are we going to do to get more people to join the fight? And I think when people hear join the fight against HIV, they think all the HIV positive people should just go and work together to end this. But it's not just the HIV positive people. We need everyone, right? The partners of the people who are living with HIV,
Right.
the friends of people who are living with HIV, the friends and the family members of the people who have died from HIV. And the list goes on and on. If you are negative, if you are having unprotected sex, if you are not using condoms, like, I mean, the list goes on. How do we get everybody to be a part of this fight towards ending HIV without um, I wouldn't say without, but just how can we get people to just prioritize this or to be a part of the fight?
It's interesting. I feel like we have to address all of the reasons why people are uncomfortable discussing health and sex in the first place. I think that's one key. Um, COVID, this pandemic, has made me realize that people think they're healthier than they really are, and a lot of people have suddenly become scientists overnight. And we live in a time where people are allowed to create their own reality, and I think it's so important for people to see those living with HIV healthy and doing well, because even in my presentations, this uh, association of HIV equals sick, like, I think that's unfortunate, and that I think that's a huge hurdle that we have to keep on correcting. And it is really tiring, because I know so many people living with HIV who are extremely healthy and who are doing the damn thing. But I also feel like we have to make sure that those living with HIV, their identity isn't solely focused on that. Like, I really have an issue with, like, people who are, advocates, or people who are in public spaces, or who navigate any sort of, like, advocacy. I don't think it's fair that they get pigeonholed, like, they're pigeonholed, right? Like, they're kind of put into this box, and that's all they're seen as, because people have kind of put HIV in the closet as, like, this dirty little secret that, we know it's out there and we hear about it, but we have to remember that, HIV test has to be consented. Like, doctors really aren't um regularly, they're not encouraging their patients to be tested. And then students in school really are not learning about HIV. Like, I remember it being touched upon, but it's something to be afraid of. And there's no empowerment in that. There's no encouragement in that.
Hmm.
And if we were to move away from the fear and the shame and the stigma. We have to be okay with normalizing it. We also have, I do think, obviously, people living with HIV, I think they need to be centered in this fight, and they need to be able to speak up. But those who are not living with HIV also need to normalize these conversations regularly, and find a way to speak up about it in spaces where it's probably not being discussed. And I really think we need to put more pressure on our local politicians, our school systems, our medical system. Like, it needs to be, it can't just be grassroots. We need to start making the people in those arenas uncomfortable. We
You know,
have to make them uncomfortable.
absolutely. And I said on the last call, not the last call, the last show, we were talking to, I believe, Sandra Anderson, and we were talking about that. And we were saying, we need everybody to be part of this fight, and we need everybody to work together. And
Right.
so, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, blue, purple. We all need to work together, and but they're also, we have to kind of like get beyond this idea of what equality and equity look like within organizations. And because a lot of times, companies hire a lot of black and brown people on the ground floor, right? So when people walk in, they see that, but then those black and brown people don't get to make decisions, right? They don't get to be decision makers. They don't get to say this is where the funding needs to go.
Right.
So that becomes problematic when we open up our services to people, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily align from the top down with what the needs of those peoples are. And so that can be very problematic for a lot of people, um, and that can be very problematic from within and from without the organization as well. So, um, one of the other things that we touched upon is that when HIV first started, a group of white men got together and were demanding that the government paid attention to this. They were
Mhm.
demanding medication. They were demanding healthcare. They were demanding like studies and research. I mean, they were just they got together and demanded. And
Assertive.
so and if you notice, HIV is shifted, right? Um,
Big
and
time.
so then we looked and saw that it was now affecting black and brown people, black and Hispanics and Latinos. And so the Hispanic folks got together and Latino folks got together and said, hey, you know what? We need this in our own language. We need this, you know, culturally how we relate. We need to understand this from our cultural perspective. And their rates got better. But black folks haven't really been given that opportunity. They haven't really been given the funding. They haven't really been given the space to be able to do that. So, do you see that as a challenge for us towards moving towards ending the HIV epidemic?
Absolutely, because again, it's health related, and I think when you deal with minority populations in this country, there is constantly uh, barriers with access to care. If you're an immigrant, if you're low income, if you are in a single parent household, if you don't have a formal education, if you don't speak English, like, these are the people that are not only most at risk, but they're very disenfranchised, and they need to have it needs to be, there needs to be equity, there needs to be a even level playing field. Like, if everybody had the access in their respective languages, if the access was available conveniently in their areas, and if it were just so much easier to access, right? Just overall, if you could think of any social determinant, and there were active active efforts to make those resources more widely available, I think that would help. But you have a system that's really broken. Like, I think the medical system, there's no one medical system. I think that's unfortunate. You know, you have all of these different insurance plans and insurance companies, and there's things, there's a class disparity that's crazy here. It's getting more expensive to live here. When you think
Right.
about all of those things, it makes sense as to why things are not aligned, because I don't think necessarily one system or one universal system is necessarily the answer, but it doesn't make sense when everyone is just trying, when everyone's doing something different in the same field, and there's like no middle ground. It's very confusing. And I often feel like when I'm around like the bigwigs of these fields, um, in different aspects of like the medical profession, of public health or whatever, it does often feel like everyone is just doing their own thing and everyone's mission is different. And I feel like when there is chaos, HIV appears, right? So, like, if you have a community that does not have, um, you know, the essentials like great, like supermarkets, doctor's offices,
Mm-hmm.
um, affordable gyms, affordable education, after school programs, all of these things. And if you're not even up to the church, the houses of worship, I think they also should be invested, because especially in this country, religion is put on a pedestal, and they will listen to those people who are in power. I think there are more and more churches and houses of worship that are willing to have these conversations, but it's chipping away slowly. It's just starting. Like, I love going to health fairs at churches where I can give condoms and where we can bring the mobile unit, but it's like,
Those conversations, because I know a lot of fake groups are like, no condoms, no, you
yeah,
can't do this. And we're like, but you might have congregants who are living with HIV.
no, they do, and they
You know,
don't know it. And that's
exactly.
the thing. They assume that they know everybody's health, and they assume that everyone's having sex for procreation. We have to stop
And
assuming.
within the context of marriage, right?
Yes, we have to stop assuming what people are doing, because like we're putting, I think that they put their nose and their assumptions in places it doesn't belong, when overall I think what people who are in positions of power, who are those gatekeepers, like they're the game changers. Like, if you're in a community where there's a lack of access, the church is probably like a centerpiece of it.
Mhm.
You have power. You're actually standing in the way of people not only openly having discussions, not only with their doctor, but even with their partners, even with their relatives. Like, we should live in a society where we shouldn't have to, where we should regularly have these conversations. Like, partners should be talking about sex with each other, students should be talking about sex year round, because they're thinking about sex every day. And HIV is not solely just a sex thing. I mean, it really isn't. But obviously, HIV, I think it just brings up so many uncomfortable areas that people don't want to discuss, a lot of taboos, because when you talk about HIV, and you have to talk about sexuality, you have to talk about gender identity, you may have to discuss racism and classism, you have to discuss a lot of things that make people uncomfortable, and I don't want to talk about politics, all of that crap. I think that is what's so interesting, is that a virus, a condition, not only affects people physically, but it also creates room for conversations that have needed to happen for a long time. And I think a lot of people in powerful positions or in different fields, they're just not willing to be uncomfortable. They're willing to stay in familiar territory, in familiar waters, and who gets affected by it, who suffers from it. It's the people who don't have. So I just think when it comes to HIV, a lot of times we're talking about like a power. It's a power thing. It's literally like, if you have power and if you have access, it's you have the ability to like not deal with something, whereas people who don't have the power often struggle and now have to deal with all of these different things that come up. And I can imagine how tough it is, like, to, start exploring yourself sexually and start having relations, right? But not even knowing what you're doing because your family's not talking about it, the school's not talking about it. And then one day you probably just get a diagnosis, and then you're thrust into this world that you're not even aware of how to like navigate everything. You're not even aware of how to access all of these things, and you're inundated and you're bombarded with all of this terminology, and you have all these appointments. Like, it's a lot, and we really have to, as a society, take responsibility for not doing our part. And each time we're not willing to have conversations about injustices or inequities, um, it's just going to make people more vulnerable. Yeah. Oh shoot. Okay. So I'm gonna have to get out of here now. So what do we do? Do you think? What do you think we should do? No. I'm probably gonna. I mean, I'm gonna be in Palm Beach for the rest of the night. So I don't know what you want to do. It says it's still live for me. Gonna have to edit this or reshoot. Yeah, totally. Okay. Hey there. So we're just going through some technical difficulties. We are gonna move forward, and Richardo, excuse me, Richardo is going to come back into the room any minute now. But I am so happy to be on this call, and
No, thank you for being on the call. I think it's really important that we have these conversations, and of course we have technical issues going on. Thank
it,
goodness I'm not a conspiracy theorist, because I've been like
oh
they
no,
shut us down.
please don't save yourself. Save yourself.
No, so I really because I know we have today we're having a very short show,
Yeah.
so we're just kind of like want to wrap up, but we're gonna have to continue this conversation. So we'll definitely have Kashai back on so we can
Yes.
continue this conversation, because we were getting into the middle of some stuff, and it's a lot. We have to unpack this. So if you notice, for this month, we've just been having conversations specifically around ending the HIV epidemic, because there's so much to unpack, right? To unpack, we have the the health, we have the treatment, we have the care, we have the mental health, we have
Hmm.
the linkage, we have community, we have
Everything.
funding, we have faith-based institution, community leaders, and the whole nine. So I want you guys to just continue to follow, like, share, and subscribe. And then we will definitely continue the conversation. And we would love for you to continue to be part of this conversation. There are meetings happening locally throughout all of the counties in Florida that involves like HIV care council meetings, community forums, and all of that. If you have time, or make some time to join and participate, because we need your voice. Everyone's voice is important. And if we're going to end HIV so we can have an AIDS free generation, we need everybody to be a part of that. Any closing words, Kishai?
I can't wait to come back. Let's book it. Let's make it happen because we did just scratch the surface. But there's so much. There is a lot to discuss. This is not a ABC 1 2 3 topic,
Right.
and I do it all in the hope of progress. That is why I do what I do.
Right. And we're not here to like bash any particular community or bash anyone or whatever the case is. If we are going to examine something, we need to look at all sides of it. We need to have discussions about it. We need to look inside and have discussions. And then we need to figure out if something is working. We have to evaluate, is it working? Is it not working? What parts work? Can we just take the part that works and put it over here? It's kind of like our own version of Honda, right? You just take the parts you need, put it on whatever, so you can make it better, so you
I
can go
agree.
the distance, right? So we might need to get a door from over here, an engine from there, a tire, a muffler. We gotta and put it all together
Hmm.
so we can get to this finish line. So
Absolutely.
thank you again, Kashai, and
You.
um, we'll be back with part two
Let's book it.
this mini series. And we thank you guys for watching. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe. If you have questions that you didn't get to ask today, please ask them inside the group chat. We'll do our best to answer them. Or when we come back on next week, you can join us, and we'll be able to continue to have those conversations. In the meantime, know your HIV status, get tested, and if you want to know how or where, you can reach out to us, Campbell Health Solutions, at 561-208-6595. Thank you again, and talk to you soon.